Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody, to another week of Sports Daily. Training camps underway. The TBT gives us one in. That's the way we like to see it. We get the Aftershocks advancing to play in that, the play-in game to the Final Four, essentially. That happens on Tuesday at Coke Arena. Much more on that coming up later in the show. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor. Chad Chambers producing for us. We'll have some giveaways, as always, here for you on the show, so stay tuned for your chances to win some HTO, for your chances to win some WinSurge vouchers. All kinds of good stuff coming up today for you. Of course, the IHOP hotline is open at 869-1240. If you're listening to us in the car on the stream, you can also watch our video stream, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Is where you can find that video stream. Tommy, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. It was a good weekend. Glad to be here today. And, we've got the video stream going on right now. I mean this with all due respect. Did you get a little bit of sun this weekend?
Yeah, I got sun.
You look like you got a little bit of sun.
I just remembered to turn on my my little light thing here. But yes, I did. I spent most of Saturday in the sun at a great pool party some of our friends have every year. It's like an annual tradition. And yes, and I spent most of that time playing pool volleyball because our team was doing well. So you don't give up the court. So we sat there and there was no reapplication of sunscreen or anything like that. So yeah, I just took a little bit of sun there.
Yeah. A little bit of color. Nothing wrong with that.
It takes a lot of sunscreen to cover this dome here. And it looks like, with that light shining right on there that it didn't get all the way covered, or at least it didn't stay covered for that matter. But no, it was a good weekend. We had a nice hot weekend. Felt like summer. It's going to feel like summer all week long. Not sure if that's something you like or you'd like it to just stay cool. I'll tell you, somebody in the iced tea business, I kind of like when it stays hot for a little bit. But it is a good weekend. How was the weekend for the Castors?
Yeah, it was good. We had family in town this weekend. And so, of course, that's always busy with, parties and barbecues and dinners out and, things like that. So it was one of those weekends that, woke up this morning and I thought, man, I could use another weekend. I could use another couple days to recoup. But that's not reality. We're here on a Monday and ready to go.
Weekend from the weekend. It is no more, weekend vibe in the sports world. Maybe it will be once we get into the dog days of training camp. Probably won't be, it won't be this week for sure. It won't be next week. And then we have the MLB trade deadline. Maybe that first week of August might lag a little bit and then we hit the preseason and it won't. But training camp's giving us no shortage of storylines. Of course, all the running backs, they apparently got together. This is what I'm talking about. Like, this is when you say what can be done, why does the league care? Boy, this is why. You don't want those running backs like unifying somehow and doing something crazy if you're the NFL. I heard the great Jody Mack on CBS Sports Radio here. You heard him last night. And his thought was, the NFL wants an 18th game. How do you get to the table before the next CBA? You do it that way. So I don't know, but something's cooking there, and we'll get into that. And the Chiefs have their own holdout to worry about, and Chris Jones. A lot to say about that situation. But let's start, Tommy, with the TBT. They played yesterday. The Aftershocks get the win. The Mastery Collective there could not get it done, and that doesn't surprise us. They actually got close. When we watched them, it's like, I don't know if they're going to be able to win one, and they did. They looked pretty good on Saturday, and then on Sunday, Heartfire's good. That team the Aftershocks will play tomorrow is just good. That's a part of it, and this Mass Street team probably a little bit long in the tooth. It was fun. It was nostalgic, but I hope, Tommy, that team enjoyed themselves and, can continue it and maybe, bring in some of the younger guys to mix in and become a force in this tournament, much like the Aftershocks have done, by the way. But K-State they got to win. They didn't get second win, but they represented themselves fine. I thought, for the first leg of this thing, we get one of the teams through, which is, at minimum what we hope for. Is very successful. Crowds were big. TBT, another year of success.
Of course, with the Aftershocks, you've got just this great built-in crowd at Charles Koch Arena all weekend long. You had between 4,000 and 5,000 people at the games this weekend, and that's really an accomplishment considering it's the month of July. People are on vacation. You've got summer plans. People coming out to watch basketball at Koch Arena in July. I mean, those are great attendance numbers this weekend for the Aftershocks for sure. And then, of course, you have, the built-in crowds too with Mass Street and Purple and Black. And, I'm with you on Mass Street. I just, they looked tired in that last game yesterday. I thought they looked really good on Saturday in the second round matchup against the Show Me squad. That was a fun game to watch, back and forth and competitive and all of that. And then I think the quick turnaround, they had the benefit of playing Wednesday night and then not playing again until Saturday. But then they won Saturday, had to turn around and play the very next day yesterday. They looked tired. They looked old. I didn't even realize until I started thinking about it how old some of these guys are. Keith Langford is older than we are. He's almost 40, and I can't imagine, going and doing what he did, playing in those 3 games. And I think that I'm pretty sure that this was his last ride as a player. I think he announced that
he said
before
much.
him, but he said he wanted to come back and coach, next year. So hopefully they're able to keep this squad going. And like you said, recruit some of the younger KU alums. The thing that's difficult with that, and Fran Frischella mentioned this on the broadcast, is that a lot of those younger guys are playing in the NBA or playing overseas or, still playing professional basketball. So that makes it a little bit tougher, but that was fun to watch. Purple and Black, I feel like they never really gelled quite the way that I wanted them to. There was a lot of talent on that squad. You and I talked about that after the first round matchups, that we really felt like they could potentially be a dark horse to make a run. Ultimately, they weren't able to make that happen, losing in the second round. But, I'm with you. The fact that you're able to get one of the 3 teams to advance on, that's a great achievement. And I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to watch what the Aftershocks can do against Heartfire in the quarterfinal round.
Well, right. And I thought that the Aftershocks collectively played their best game in the third game, which is good. It means they're finding a groove a little bit, and that's what you got to have, right? And, I think that they've done such a nice job bringing in the outsiders to mix in with the Shockers. And it's, those guys have been returning for a few years. It's almost like they're Shockers, by proxy, right? You got your Elam Ender last night from a guy that didn't play at Wichita State. He played at Cowley College before Iowa State, but it's cool, man. It's just fun. And it's fun to get, that's the thing. Like, it's fun to get the atmosphere in a random week in July. That's what makes it fun. Like, if this was, if the Aftershocks were playing in, I don't know, wherever, and we were just watching it on TV or on a stream, it wouldn't be nearly as fun. It's fun because Koch Arena gets rowdy, and that's why, ESPN has their national broadcast at the Wichita Regional. That's why they, have it in Wichita. It's very obvious, and it's an inherent advantage, good for the Aftershocks, and hopefully they can take it to the next level. We'll check in, see if we can't get Zach Bush to hop on tomorrow ahead of the game and give us kind of a preview now that they've had a chance to, to settle in a little bit. But it is a great tournament with a great format. I think that, time and time and time again, we see the beauty of the Elam ending is a better way to end basketball games. We say it till our face turns blue. It's just better. I mean, it is. To me, it's not even like, I don't know if you watch it now, you have to watch it enough, right? Like, if you're just like dabbling and you catch a couple and you're like, what is this? This is weird. Cause that would have been us like the first year we saw the TBT, right? It's like, what is this? This doesn't make any sense. But then as you watch it over time, you're like, this is better. Like, this is a better way to end basketball games. And, the NBA All-Star Game implemented this. So I don't, when I say, like, I wonder at some point in the history of this game, if there's ever a shift to something like this, I don't think that's as outrageous as it seems. You could do it without changing the technology, period. Like, you can't add shot clocks to high school basketball everywhere. I get that, because you have to add shot clocks. You have to physically add the shot clock and the technology to run it and have a volunteer to be on it. And that, like, I get the logistical challenges of that. There's no logistical challenges of the Elam ending. You just stop the game around 4 minutes whenever that dead ball comes, and you say, all right, +8, let's go. And everybody knows the number, right? You just write it on a big marker board, and you say, here's the number, go.
I had the games on. I think it was Friday night when both the Aftershocks played, or it might have been, it was one of the games, one of the nights this weekend, had the games on, and my wife came in, and she hasn't watched a single minute of TBT ever. And so she sits down and she's like, well, what's going on? I said, well, it's the Elam ending. I kind of explained it. And her first response was, well, that's kind of dumb. Like, I don't like that at all. But then she didn't get up from her chair, and just watched it and was kind of getting into it. And I kept saying, like, isn't this more exciting? Like every game is guaranteed to end on a game-winning shot, every single game. And it was kind of funny because she, every once in a while, she'd be like, this is so dumb. And I'm like, but you're still watching and you're like getting into it. And she didn't want to like it, but by the end of the night, she did. She's like, okay, that was pretty exciting. So I think that all it takes is that it needs, people to really get used to it a little bit. I mean, you can watch a game here and there and think, all right, it's kind of a novelty thing. It's kind of a cute idea. This wouldn't work, all the time in different levels of basketball. And then when you watch multiple games, you kind of change your mind a little bit. At least I do. Like, all right, this has got some merit to it. The NBA G League, they've implemented it in overtime games. A game goes to overtime. They're doing a variation of the Elam ending. So it's kind of like the NBA has embraced it more than other levels of basketball, because like you mentioned, the All-Star game and then the G League doing it too in overtime. And I kind of like that too. Like maybe you don't adopt it just in general, but maybe it becomes an option in overtime. Where, that's going to eliminate having quadruple overtime games and things like that. You just go to the Elam ending if a game goes into overtime. That might be a good middle ground, but I'm okay with expanding it where it makes sense in a variety of levels of basketball.
Look, it's not, again, it seems like this is outrageous and it's far left turn, but I think about this all the time. Look at what baseball just did, right? Baseball has holistically changed a lot of the rules to a great result, right? Everybody loves it. The attendance is up. Viewership is up. Everything's up. People like it. Like, it's a good change. They had to make a massive change to do that. It's not outlandish to think that the NBA and other, levels think about that. The NBA would lead the way, because think about it. Like, this is a league that added a 3-point shot that moves that line consistently. I mean, we don't need to get into all the rule changes of football. Baseball just did it. It's not outrageous, because here's what would happen. And I believe this 100%. If you changed that in the NBA, like let's just say you went, all right, we're doing the Elam ending. The ends of these games are excruciating when it's just foul, 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 right? It's in the game at the free throw line. Literally nobody wants to see that. Let's have them play it out. So you do that, people would make fun of it on Twitter for like a week. And then they'd be like, man, this is great. Look at how many buzzer beaters we get. Look at how these games are ending. It would be, people would love it. Just like everybody that watches the TBT loves it. I mean, at first you're like, what is that? And then all of a sudden it's like, that's the best thing I've ever seen. Like, why do we let these games end with timeouts and fouls and free throws and hack-a-shack? Like, that's just so dumb. And, you just kind of deal with it. This doesn't allow for any of that.
And look, if you are trying to figure out a commissioner that would be most likely to implement something like this, Adam Silver in the NBA is going to be that guy.
Mid-season tournament.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same guy that wants to do that. That literally, I don't think anybody's asking for. I know that, there's load management concerns and things like that. And, that's a reason why he, wants to do this mid-season tournament. But if he's willing to interrupt the regular season for a mid-season tournament, I think he'd be willing to implement the Elam ending. And I think that there is a argument to be made that the more that the Elam ending is used year in and year out in the tournament, it kind of becomes the beta testing ground for the Elam ending. And you better believe representatives from the NBA, probably the NCAA, other levels of basketball, I think they watch it fairly closely. Maybe they're not public about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they watch it fairly closely to see if there's merit to introducing it into their own leagues. Because, I can't tell you the number of times that I'm watching usually a college basketball game And really the most annoying time is when there's a game coming up and the game prior, there's like a minute left on the clock and the teams are fouling back and forth. And it just drags on and on. And then I miss the beginning of the next game. Part of that is the stupid broadcast windows that networks like ESPN have. But beyond that, it just extends games so long and it's so unnecessary that completely takes that off the table.
Well, you play to win, you don't play to
Right.
not lose. I mean,
Yep.
that's the fundamental difference in it. It's like that's what we all want, right? You want to play to win. You don't want to play to not lose. It's something like prevent defense. How much does that drive us nuts in the NFL? Like just, trying to hang on and not let the other team beat you instead of just, taking it to them. And I don't know. It every year I think about this. Like, why don't we? And it is growing. I mean, that's the crazy thing. 3 years ago, I'd have called myself crazy to consider that they would ever put this at
Yeah.
any level of the NBA. They put it in 2 different places. Now, I didn't even know they were doing that in the G League. So maybe put it in the preseason. I mean, I don't know. Like these coaches don't need strategy. Like you don't, whatever it is, put it in the summer league. Like let people get used to it and then take it. Because as soon as the NBA does it, then it's easy for everybody else. College and high school, which it would help college and high school more than it would help the NBA, by the way. I think like high school, it would help the most because you see coaches willing to just literally stand at the top of the key for minutes on end to close out a game in the fourth quarter. No offense to those coaches, but come on now. When nobody needs that. But that's how they win the game. So I don't know. It's coming. Aftershocks play tomorrow night. That Heartfire team looks good. I think it'll be fun. I think we're in for another scrappy, big time performance both ways, and it's gonna be a good game.
I'll tell you one thing about the Aftershocks from watching them in their first 3 games. That team is not afraid to shoot. Connor Frankamp is launching it. Daryl Willis is launching it. I mean, this is Tyrese McGee is making big shots. This team is not afraid to shoot the ball from deep, and that can be a benefit when they're on, but it could also be a pretty big detriment when they're off.
They got to play that way, though. I mean, don't they? I mean, you need Tyrese McGee. So. I thought they did a great job after the game talking to Tyrese McGee about it. They said, how many threes do you think you took? And he said 4. They were like, you missed 8 before you took that shot. Like you have to, though, you have to play it that way. So Tuesday night, we'll see. And we'll talk to Zach Bush about that. We can ask him, but I would guess that he gives these guys that green light because you can heat check it to some degree. And here's what they do well. And I think is what's been more critical to their success is they play good defense. I mean, it's really like watching old school Shocker basketball. Like they'll just defend, and that allows you to do some of that deep shot kind of stuff. Just fire it up and do whatever because you're going to play defense on the other end, and they're young enough and versatile enough that they can do that. But the Aftershocks get it done. Maybe a little more on that in hour number 2. Certainly more tomorrow. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the program today. All right, let's take a quick break. Chris Jones, oh boy, it's what we feared. Tommy, I warned you about this last week. Did you see the report today?
It's going to be fine.
Of what Chris Jones wants?
It's all going to
have it out. Next. The report's out. Here we know what Chris Jones is looking for. This is what we were worried about. 869-1240 is the number to call on that IHOP hotline, Chiefs fans. We'll talk to Big Fella when we return on Sports Daily.
The commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jake Albracht, Tommy Castor, alongside you on this Monday edition. Okay, Chris Jones, here we go. So Chris Jones doesn't show up. You get a report from Adam Schefter over the weekend that the teams are far apart. Two sides are far apart, blah, blah, blah. Obviously fed into Schefter. That's just like these reports always are by Chris Jones's agent. I would assume that's how this goes. Right? The language is always the same and everything else. Well, now we get a report this morning, Nate Taylor of The Athletic reporting that Chris Jones wants $30 million. And this is, Tommy, I've been telling you this for months now. It seems like this isn't as simple as we all want it to be, in that Chris Jones, we're just waiting on the Quinn and Williams deal. And once that gets done, this is easy. Just beat Quinn. What did I say last week? What if Chris Jones wants to get up there with Aaron Donald? And at $30 million, he would be right under. Aaron Donald's like 31. And now the Chiefs have a more difficult decision to make as they have to ponder the rest of the roster. I would imagine that if they had thought, like the reporting indicated, which is probably where that reporting came from, right, was from the Chiefs. We're kind of waiting on this Quinn and Williams deal. Well, apparently they misplayed that, because you're about what, 8-9 million different in those two numbers, probably. So that does impact what the Chiefs and Brett Veach have planned for the rest of the roster. It's not everything to like this year. I would imagine that they have a roadmap plan for the next 3 years, Tommy. And if that money gets too big, they're going to have a more difficult decision that they've got to make than just, we'll give him whatever he wants, because that does impact more than just this year's salary cap.
I think that number can be made up. There might be an $8 to $9 million gap. But I think that, this is the way that negotiations usually go. You've got one side coming down and one side coming up. And eventually you meet somewhere in the middle. And I don't know if that's going to be more towards the side of Chris Jones or more towards the side of the Chiefs. Probably the side of Chris Jones would be my guess. But I think that number can be made up. I know that $8 or $9 million in theory sounds like a lot, but there are so many different creative ways that the Chiefs can structure this deal to make it work for them and for Chris Jones. I think it's going to get done. The thing about it that makes this surprising to me is how rare it is for a Chief to hold out and not report to training camp. Like, that doesn't happen. You hear, rumblings from time to time about contract extensions. Remember Orlando Brown? It wasn't that long ago that, there was all of that going on when, he wanted an extension and wanted a lot more money. And there were conversations going back and forth, and it went public a few different times, but he never held out. He did not report to training camp. Like, this is really rare when you have a player of any caliber not reporting to training camp for the Chiefs. Keep in mind, there is no way that the Chiefs place the franchise tag on Chris Jones, because that amount is so high. And if you place the franchise tag on him, then at that point, like, just forget any kind of contract extension. So they're not going to do that.
They have the cap space to place the tag.
Yeah. And even if they did, I don't think they would, because that amount is so high for that position. But the reason why I think that ultimately this is going to get done, and I don't know if we're talking about later this week or next week, or I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but the reason why I still am optimistic is because I think the Chiefs understand how important Chris Jones is to the franchise. And you and I have had this conversation multiple times about whether or not they would be willing to pay him. And yes, it's about his talent level, but it's also about his durability. Chris Jones played more snaps at defensive tackle than any other player in the National Football League last season. That by itself is incredibly difficult to replace. I don't care what other plan you have. I don't care who else you have on that roster. They had Daniel Wise, the former KU Jayhawk, filling in at first team defensive tackle over the weekend alongside Derek Nottie. And that's cool, I guess, but he's not a starting defensive tackle in the NFL. That's not going to be your replacement. I think that the Chiefs understand that because of not only the talent level and the accomplishments and everything that Chris Jones brings, but also just his ability to stay on the field nonstop is a major factor why I think that ultimately they will still get this done.
So the cap number is only 18 million. I mean, he's getting like, he's asking for 60% more than that on a longer deal. It's not the cap number. They would never offer him that because he'd never take it, nor should he. And I don't think they can afford it, quite frankly. Well, they probably could. He's under contract. He doesn't need the tag. Like, he's got a contract. Right. He's going to make 19 million this year, whatever. Which is, right at the cap number. It's getting the extension. And so, look, the out is this year, I think. And I don't know what the dates are on that out to get it without it. The problem is what I've feared the whole time. It's that he wants more than everybody thinks he wants. And if the Chiefs think he wants less, it's going to screw up their plans long term. They traded Tyreek Hill on a dime when they traded Tyreek Hill. Like, if you read the stories of how that played out, like, they were ready to pay him a lot of money. Devontae Adams got a huge deal. Tyreek Hill then said, well, I want to beat that. And they were like, no, cannot do that. And they traded him. I'm not saying the Chiefs are going to trade Chris Jones. What I'm saying is they have a long plan, because when you draft well, you have to pay a lot of players. And the Chiefs have drafted well the last 2 years at least. And so now they've got all these guys in 2 or 3 years, big impact players who are young, who they're going to have to figure out a way to pay. They've already got Travis Kelce underpaid. They already in relative terms have Patrick Mahomes underpaid. They're going to ask Chris Jones to then be underpaid. It's so that, like, that's their plan, right? To take this camaraderie and say, okay, well, how do we keep this together? Tyreek Hill didn't want that part of the plan. Like, he wanted the most money. They said, all right, see you later. We can't do it. And so I don't know where this goes. If the Chiefs, though, were that far off in what they thought he wanted, and they have this roadmap for all these other players to get their extensions, including Patrick Mahomes, then that messes all of this up. And that's why this gets really complicated. You basically have to change all that. And if you're willing to, it's pretty much you go down a list and say, okay, if we're willing to do what we weren't thinking about Jones, who are we willing to not have down the road? And I don't think any of the offensive linemen are in play, because I think they want those guys forever, because
I agree.
Those guys are very important to Patrick Mahomes. And so I don't know who it is. Who does it cost you down the road? I don't know if there's a way to massage it, maneuver it. The problem is they don't have the room to front load it. They don't have any cap space. So they can't just say, it's fine, we'll give you all the money now. And they can't do that because they don't have the cap space to do it. So they have to backload it. And when you backload it, it screws up everything.
You're kicking the can down the road. You're kicking the can down the road, and it might end up costing you potentially guys like Willie Gay or Trent McDuffie, members on that defense. The Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to tell you right now, are not trading Chris Jones. That is not going to happen. That will not happen. And if it does, then I have serious concerns for the first time ever about the Kansas City Chiefs front office and Brett Veach. If they were going to trade Chris Jones, the time to trade Chris Jones was before the NFL draft. Not now.
Totally.
Not in late July, early August.
Same time they traded Tyreek Hill. I just
because
can't
you missed the window to get draft picks right away to immediately help you. So but that's off the table as far as I'm concerned.
It feels like they didn't know the number that he was going to want. That's what it feels like to me. It was weird. Like, this whole thing has been a little strange. Like, it's not like a disconnect, like there's animosity, but it's felt like there was a disconnect because we've all just assumed, right? Well, Chris Jones he'll see these other tackles on the market this offseason, then he'll just slot in right ahead of them and under Aaron Donald, and we'll be good. Well, the reality is he's been as impactful as Aaron Donald has been the last 2 years. And so it's not unreasonable that Chris Jones wants to get up to that territory. It's not unreasonable at all. It's just like none of us expected it because we all just, Chris Jones loves being a Chief. They love him here. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. I think the Chiefs may have misplayed their hand a little bit on that. And boy, I don't know, man. I'm worried that this thing lingers, and I don't know where the solution is. And if they do solve it in the short term, I am worried about the long term and what it might cost them down the road. And again, I love Chris Jones. He's one of
Yeah.
my favorite players in football. Love that guy.
I'm still not overly concerned. I think I land where Andy Reid currently is right now when he said that he was surprised that Chris Jones held out. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm surprised. I'm still not yet concerned. If this drags on all the way through training camp and then we're talking into preseason and whatever, and there still is not something done and there's still no resolution, and Chris Jones is getting fined $50,000 a day that's mandatory, that cannot be waived, it cannot be taken away as part of the CBA, then at that point, okay, yeah, I'm going to start to get a little bit concerned about the long-term future of him being a part of this roster. But I think that clearly what you've had here, and you mentioned it before, you had Jones's agent drop a report to Adam Schefter. Then you had the Chiefs PR team drop another statement about what he was wanting. And now I think that the two sides start to find a way to meet somewhere in the middle, maybe leaning more Chris Jones's direction. But I do think that this is going to get done. And I do think my prediction right now, if I had a crystal ball, I would say that we will see Chris Jones report to training camp before training camp wraps up.
I would agree with that, and I think it'll be probably around 28 million. My concern comes if the Chiefs didn't have any idea that this was coming, because then that alters what else they've been thinking about doing down the road. That would be where my concern comes. The Patrick Mahomes deal, nobody's worried about getting it done, but it makes me, do they need to get the Patrick Mahomes deal done to free up the money to get the Chris Jones deal done? And then at that point, do they have to try and throw Travis Kelce a bone? Like, I just can't imagine if they miscalculated that number, which I think that they did, that it doesn't disrupt a lot of things, and it's not a simple or quick fix to get it done, right? Like if you thought he was going to want 22 million and he wants 30, and you have all this other stuff you're simultaneously trying to work on, it's like, uh-oh, now what do we do? Can we find that money? Do we even have that money? Number one, like, do we have that money on the books currently with what we have signed up? That's the first place you have to start. Okay, we do or we don't. Then what do we have to do? Well, let's go restructure Mahomes, I guess, now and see if we can't free that money up and kick that down the road. Okay. Well, Travis Kelce, it's been brought up to him. He seems okay. We probably need to make sure he's okay. And then we got to start thinking about Gay and all those defenders that we've got to lock up. Like, how is this going to get done? It gets really complicated if they really did miscalculate that number by that much, right? And maybe they didn't. Maybe it's all semantics, and the Chiefs saw this coming a mile away. Maybe behind the scenes, Chris Jones's agent has been like, hey, guys, we want 30. Great. We want 30. Yeah, we did see what Quinnen Williams signed for. That's cool. Good for him. We want 30. If that has been happening, then the Chiefs had an understanding of that, and they've been preparing for it. That's the part we don't know. Did the Chiefs know he wanted 30? Have they known he wanted 30? Or were they just banking on him taking a discount, which would be a discount?
Yeah, I think that situations like this, it's a prime reminder that the Chiefs are rarely going to be majorly involved in big-time free agent signings because they just don't have the money to do it. They're focused on revamping existing contracts and extensions and things like that with their current players and then drafting well. That's the strategy. It's not going out typically and finding the big, other than left tackle, typically, a big time free agent signing. That's just not really what they do. So I do think that while long term, and I get your concern long term, I'm not concerned about that necessarily right now. There are some players that I wouldn't want to lose. I don't want to lose Creed Humphrey at center. I don't want to lose Trey Smith. That offensive line, I feel like you got to do everything you can to keep them intact. I don't want to lose Willie Gay. I don't want to lose Trent McDuffie. However, and I mentioned this last week, Brett Veach typically, I think you throw away Clyde Edwards-Helaire, drafts pretty well and, is able to find guys that can make big immediate impacts. So again, I'm not saying I want to lose any of those guys, but if ultimately that happens, I still do have faith that if you have to draft a replacement, Brett Veach and the scouting department, they typically do pretty well with that.
Well, you will have to draft replacements. It's which ones do you do? And
Yeah.
that's Chris Jones is 29 years old. He's 29 years old. That's what's going to make this tricky. If he wants a 3-year, $30 million a year deal, okay, you could probably find a way to swallow pretty close to that. What if he wants 4 years?
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd do that for
I mean,
a 29-year-old. I love Chris Jones, but I don't know that I'd do it.
Do you feel at all any level of confidence whatsoever with who is on that depth chart at defensive tackle?
No, for this year,
Chris
no.
Jones?
That's
this year.
Well, that's the balance. Did you feel confident in their wide receiver room when they traded Tyreek Hill? I mean,
No,
sometimes
you
either have to make the tough decision now or you have to make it in a year or two.
Yeah, but I think that it's kind of apples and oranges, because you can have wide receivers that sort of come out of nowhere and step up in their revelations. I think Sky Moore can be one of those guys.
Yeah, but they didn't have that
happens
last year.
I know, but you had some players that were able to step up in those spots. Plus, you had Patrick Mahomes throwing you the football, and really Travis Kelce is the number one wide receiver on that team. It's a little bit different, I think, on the defensive line on the other side of the ball. It's very easy for somebody to look outmatched against offensive lines in the NFL behind Chris Jones. I don't want that to happen this season. So I don't feel confidence whatsoever in who they have on the roster at that position.
Let's address that. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll do a giveaway. I want to get into that portion of it. What if Chris Jones didn't report? Like, what if this was it? I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll go through the scenario. 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. Jad has that for us. We'll come back. More Chris Jones talk on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. We're chatting about Chris Jones. Want to get into Tommy's thoughts on what's behind him on the roster. Before we do that, it is hot outside. Let's give away some iced tea. So, Tommy, it is also Christmas in July week at HTO, which means there'll be discounts all week, Monday through Saturday. So, coming here for you, I'll tell you the first 2 days of this. So they go in two. So Monday and Tuesday, the Albanese gummies, all those candies, and the beef jerky, which is Clinton Sons, which is from a place real close to where I'm from in like White Deer, Texas. It's good stuff if you haven't tried it. Those will be heavily discounted, half price jerky, 2 for $5 on the gummies. Then Wednesday and Thursday, some swag you can get your hands on. You probably see me wearing some of it, hats, shirts, all that kind of stuff. That's all half off Wednesday and Thursday. And then here's the big one, Tommy, Friday and Saturday, 20 to 30% off all the coolers and drinkware, Hydro Flask, Pelican included in that. So a lot of discounts this week. It's Christmas in July, but we'll give away a couple of free iced tea cards. Those would be good for East or West locations coming soon, pretty soon in Derby. Don't have a date for you for our friends down there, getting that one opened up, but East or West in Wichita, you can get your hands on 2 free iced teas. First caller to the IHOP hotline right now, 869-1240 is that number. Good luck. We'll give away some Wind Surge tickets in hour number 2, but there you go, 869-1240 to get some free iced tea. All right, Tommy, you mentioned what's behind Chris Jones. I get it. Chris Jones is one of the most impactful defensive players in football. But, what part of what Chris Jones does I think, do we immediately become concerned about? Let's, like, in any scenario, if he's not on the field, right? If he misses games from injury, whatever, like, which part of his game are we most concerned about? I would say it's probably quarterback pressure, right? Like, he's a great run block, he's great run stuffer, all those things. It's the quarterback pressure from the interior that you get concerned about. I will at least say, though, and they did spend a first-round pick on a pass rusher, right? No, it's not from the interior, but in theory, unless they miss on that pick, they would get better rushing from the edges now. Year 2 of Karlaftis, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, the first-round pick. So you do incur some of the pass rush that way. It would obviously have to look a little different. The run stopping, Chris Jones is irreplaceable. You're never going to get replacement value. But can you? It's sort of like Tyreek Hill. The Chiefs were never going to get replacement value for Tyreek Hill, no matter what they did. But they found a way to do things a little differently that was still effective enough. That's what the great teams have to do. Again, I think Chris Jones ultimately gets signed. I'm not as concerned about the 30 as I am how many years he wants on this deal, because he is 29 years old, and that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow, to pay that position, or really anybody outside a quarterback in this league, or maybe an offensive lineman. I mean, we've seen this song and dance before. Justin Houston comes to mind. Like, you have to be careful late in careers in the NFL to give these big, long deals, because it can bite you.
He's 29 years old, and so I'm okay with giving him, honestly, a 4-year deal if that's what he wants. I think he can still be incredibly impactful at 32 and 33. Maybe not quite at the level, but I do think that he can still be one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL at that age. Reading Nate Taylor's article from The Athletic, the stat that stood out to me the most as far as his impact, 71% of Chris Jones's sacks ended an opponent's drive. So he was the closer for the Chiefs defense. He got through when the Chiefs needed it the most. And that's what he was able to do. I think you lose that, it's going to be really hard to replace. Keep in mind, Tershawn Wharton, who was the projected backup, is rehabbing from a torn ACL. He's going to start the year on the PUP list. You've got Daniel Wise. He's played 17 games, all with the Commanders, never registered a sack. And then they drafted Keandre Coburn in the 5th round, and he can be a defensive tackle too. I don't feel confident at all about anybody behind Chris Jones for this coming season.
I don't either. My point is, the pass rush, though, you could address in a different way. I really wish Aaron Donald didn't get hurt last year, so we could know how he was playing at 31. And if there's any indication on, like, when his numbers, I don't want to go look at, like, Warren Sapp, because I don't think Warren Sapp is in the kind of shape that Chris Jones or Aaron Donald is in. I don't know about age at defensive tackle. I just don't. So we'll continue the conversation. This has gone to a place I'd feared, because I think whether they get the deal done or not, it's going to impact the future of the franchise for sure. Kevin wins the HTO. Congratulations, Kevin. We'll come back. We'll have some Win Surge vouchers to give away in the second hour. Lots to get through. There's other news and notes from training camps that we need to touch on as well. Some massive injuries today already in training camp. Just slap you in the face with that reminder. Are we really bothered that Chris Jones isn't practicing training camp? I don't care if anybody doesn't practice. It means maybe they don't get hurt. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll come back. More Sports Daily, hour number 2, right after this.
Live Mornings with Bob and Tom. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, alongside you here on this Monday edition. We get news from Chiefs camp. We didn't want to see Chris Jones not there. Once more than I think the general public hypothesized. We're pondering what that means. We've got other NFL news. The Aftershocks advance to play tomorrow night. Much more on that coming tomorrow. Kevin wins our HTO giveaway. We'll have a Win Surge giveaway coming up this hour. Thanks for listening to us on KFH. You can call in. The IHOP hotline is always open at 869-1240 is that number to call. You can do that anytime, or you can leave us your comments on our video stream, which you'll find on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, if that's still what it's being called. I'm not sure. Another confusing moment in social media for me. But let's jump to that IHOP hotline for some Chris Jones talk. Mike on the line. Mike, what's up?
Hey, guys. Hey, it's cool to be on the air. If I were Chris Jones, I'd be more concerned about staying on an excellent Chiefs team so that way I could win more Super Bowl rings. Because considering how much money Jones already makes, how much money does one person need?
Yeah, Mike, he has not made just gobs yet. If you look at his salary history, and this is a part of the reason why I'm not surprised that he wants this. 2022, Tommy, was the first time he's been paid. Other than that, he just hasn't, he hasn't made a ton of money in the league. His base salary in 2020 was $14 million, which was the first time he made anything. And then in 2021, they kind of kicked the can down the road a little bit. He restructured for him, got paid last year and would get paid this year at 22. But he has not been on some massive contract yet. He's made $67 million thus far in his career, which is the guaranteed money essentially that Quinnen Williams just signed for. And you got to think of it in relative terms. I mean, that's the thing. It's what is it among his peers? Yeah, we might think that number and think, oh my God, we'd never, and you get probably, I think most guys get about half of that. And we appreciate the call, Mike. You get about half after taxes and you pay your agents and all that, maybe even a little less than half. But it's all relative, right? Like what's the guy next to you getting paid? I mean, we would all, and look, there are situations where guys have taken pay cuts. Quarterbacks do it, but quarterbacks get paid a ton. And quarterbacks know that the situation matters probably more than any other position. But if you're doing a job and you think you're doing it better than the person next to you and they're being paid far more than you are, like, yeah, you know what? Like, I kind of maybe think that I need to be getting paid a little more than that. And the other thing about athletes that you got to remember, their earnings window in reality is less than 10 years, right? That's the ability you have to, you've worked your entire life to develop this skill set and you can capitalize on that if you're lucky, right? For about 8 years, probably. And it's even less than that. So, I don't ever fault guys for doing this. Now, Chris Jones is in a little bit of a different situation here. He's looking for about $10 million more than what he would make this year, maybe even a little less than that. I think there's a number in the middle that you can reach. I don't think that's the hard part. I think the hard part is length of time, and did the Chiefs plan for this appropriately? Did they plan for it? I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. Surely this did not blindside them. Because what benefit would Chris Jones have to do it that way, right? I mean, surely they've been telling him what they were looking for the whole time.
Yeah, here's the other thing that I think is very important to keep in mind. I am done, and I've been done for a while, giving players this benefit of the doubt that they would rather take less money to stay on a winning team and win Super Bowls. Like, I think that is a fallacy to think about. The exception to the rule, it's guys like Patrick Mahomes But more often than not, and I think that it's very important that, everybody start realizing players are going to go where they can make the most money. They are wanting to earn as much as they can and
90% of the
maximize.
time. Yeah.
But I would say even more than that. I mean, it is the exception to the rule big time that a player is willing to take less money to go and potentially play for a winning team or play for a certain quarterback, play for a certain head coach.
Well,
They want to earn money.
I think
they want to earn money.
I know, it's
and I
hard
think
for
that
Chiefs
that's
fans,
got to
though.
be where everybody starts, as opposed to starting from a position of, oh, for sure he's going to want to take less money to continue to play for the organization. Like, that's a recipe for being supremely disappointed, regardless of the player. The bottom line is they want to make what they feel like they deserve. That's the bottom line. And if there's an exception to that, great, and we'll celebrate that. But more often than not, they just want to get paid.
But the Chiefs' two most high-profile players do that, and I think that's what makes it sometimes hard for Chiefs fans. Like, why would you ever want to leave this, right? The Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce they don't make as much as they should. They're willing to do it, and that's fine. Good for those two guys. They both also are very marketable off the field and have other ways to earn, not just now, but down the road. But the other part of this where there's pressure is the players have a union to consider. And Patrick Mahomes toes this line well, right? Because Patrick Mahomes, like, I believe based on, what we see from him, he doesn't care that he's the highest paid, but he knows that there's a responsibility he feels to his peers when you're in a union like that to make as much as you can so that they can make as much as they can. And so there's that pressure too. Like, Chris Jones may want to say, yeah, I'd be fine with whatever, but what about the 5 next defensive tackles that come in after him, right? There's that pressure too. And those guys feel that pressure. That's a part of the, you gotta think about that when you think about these unions. Do you do something that's going to make all of your peers hate you? And do you set their potential careers back in doing it, on that level too? That's definitely a big piece of this. And we see guys talk about it. Like, I got to make sure. Mahomes does it really well. He addresses that issue well. I also have to make sure that the guys coming after me, behind me, have the opportunity to do their best too. So it's a really complicated thing. And let's not pretend like these poor owners either, right? The Dan Snyder, who did, by all accounts, one of the worst jobs ever in the history of sports ownership, just made $6 billion in a sale of the Commanders. Okay, so if you're going to hold it against the players for wanting that money, hold it against the other side too, because they're making far
100%,
more, right?
100%.
Like, it's not even.
And that's, that whole argument, and I'm not trying to single out Mike here. I've heard this from multiple people, but this argument of how much money could one person need? Okay, it's not about that. It's about being paid relative to the skill set that you have. And if you are the best in the world at what you do, or I guess even the second best in the world at what you do, keep in mind how exclusive of a club that is. Being at the highest level as a starting defensive lineman on a championship winning team with a skill set that basically shows the world that you can earn a certain amount of money, then you're going to want to make that money. Like, I honestly, I don't begrudge Chris Jones at all. And if there is, some kind of miscommunication between Jones's team and the Chiefs, PR and front office and all of that, and that's why we've got kind of this war of words going on right now, I honestly, I don't really put that on the shoulders of Chris Jones. The guy wants to get paid. He is in the prime to get, he's got one more big contract probably in him. I've got no problem with him wanting to get that money.
No problem at all. And I also don't have a problem with the Chiefs trying to figure out what's best for the Chiefs either. They've got to take care of their other players too in their franchise and win as many games as they can win. I'm trying to go back and look at, defensive tackles and, when have they began to, so we don't know yet with Aaron Donald because he was hurt last year. He's only, 2 years older than Jones. Bryant Young jumped to mind. He certainly slowed, just looking at the numbers after he turned 28, quite frankly. So it is a tough scenario. I think the length becomes the real sticking point here on this deal. I think they can find the money. I think they can figure out a way to massage the money because
Me
they
too.
do still have the benefit of a Patrick Mahomes restructure to help them do that. It's how long is it going to happen? That's what gets really complicated to me. We talking 3 years? We talking 4 years? I don't know if I don't know if I'm going 4 if I'm the Chiefs. That's a long time. If it's
I would.
3, you would at
I would.
30 or 29?
Yeah, I would. We're not talking about Chris Jones being 37 at the end of this contract. We're talking about him being 33, and I think that he can still be an impactful defensive lineman at a high level at the age of 33. Do you really think that his skill set will decline that significantly from 29 to 33, where we look back on that 4th year and say, man, the Chiefs shouldn't have given him a 4-year contract? Because I think the chances of that happening, barring some kind of injury, I think that is pretty unlikely.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really, really hard. I don't have a good example. JJ Watt, some of the best players we've seen over the last few years definitely declined at a certain age. It's not one of those areas, I think, where guys age well. It's just hard because I don't have, like, in front of me right now, I don't have a good list. So I can't say one way or the other what that age, like we sort of know when it is for running backs now, right? We sort of know where it is for wide receivers historically. We know that quarterbacks have the ability to play the longest, right? And kickers and punters. Offensive linemen do
But
okay.
wouldn't you say that, like, outside of, I don't know, quarterbacks and kickers and punters, the line, like on both sides of the ball, that's probably the next
defensive end? Absolutely not. No way.
Not defensive end, but like interior linemen, like you've got on both sides of the ball. There are plenty of examples of players playing into their late 30s at those positions. So and the other thing too to keep in mind, the Chiefs and every NFL franchise, they are very good at figuring out ways to make contracts work long term. So let's say that Chris Jones is hung up on getting a 4th year on that contract. What would be the harm of the Chiefs going ahead and giving him that 4th year, knowing that after 3 years, then they can go and restructure it, or they can go and they can find a way? And I know that, you're kicking the can down the road. I know you're basically, mortgaging your future a little bit at that point, but I think that they can get creative in that 4th year to make it work long term. If it were me, I'm not going to let a potential 4th year in the contract be the reason why I don't re-sign Chris Jones. I'm going to find a way to make that work.
But the reason that happens is because you have a plan for what you're going to do in that year. And this doesn't allow you to do that as well. John Randall stayed at a high level after the age of 30. He's the only one I've found so far. Geno Atkins is up there with these guys. He's not done yet. I'm going to keep looking at this.
But if you're going to make that argument, then I think you need to be advocating for them to not sign him at all, because he's 29. And if there's a decline that happens as soon as you turn 30, then what's the point in signing him at all? Let him walk entirely.
Kennedy goes down.
Don't sign him to a contract. And let him go find another team who's willing to pay him. And I don't think that's the right move. But if you're going to, but I'm just saying, if you're going to get hung up on a 4th year and a decline between the ages of 32 and 33, at that point, I think we're splitting hairs a little bit.
It's not that it's splitting hairs. It's that you have to mitigate your risk in a big, massive contract like this. I'm just looking across Warren Sapp's final 4 years. He had one good year in there when he was in Oakland. I'm trying to find a history at the position to know, because there is risk in all of the years. So you're increasing your risk the more years you have. Now, sure, there's a chance Chris Jones plays great in all of those years. Absolutely, that's on the table. Dude's a physical specimen that takes care of himself, does all the right things, all of those things, right? I'm just trying to find, historically, how much risk really is there at that position? And it seems like there is a moderate amount of risk in length of time after the age of 29 or 30 for this position. Now, there have been outliers in the list. I'm literally taking like Gil Brandt's top guys at the position and just trying to look at their careers. And, they're all able to play. So that's a good thing, right? Like they're at least able to be out there. I wish that the Chiefs could figure out a way to front load the deal. That's what I would do, but I don't think that they can. Maybe they can turn a bunch into a bonus and do it that way. But in like a perfect world, you figure out a way to front load this deal now, but teams almost never do that because if you front load it, then now you have a situation with Willie Gay and, L'Jarius Sneed and potentially Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith that you have to navigate. It's just complicated. My whole point to all of this isn't that they should or shouldn't sign him. At 4 years, I'd begin to really worry. 3 would be fine. But it's what do the Chiefs have planned for this money that they potentially now aren't going to have? That's why I think this could get more complicated than just, give Chris Jones what he wants. I'm sure they would love to do that. But they have a salary cap to maneuver the next few years. I don't know if they're able to, accurately project how much the cap will go up because it certainly will. It's just not easy. We'd all hope they'd be like, all right, Quinnen Williams signed, Chris Jones comes in right over the top of him. We can all move on and everything will be great. That's what we've been saying all summer, right? Just wait on the Quinnen Williams deal. But it's clearly more complicated than that.
It is. I think that it's very cut and dry and clear for what Chris Jones wants. And I think that
Taylor it is.
And I think that he is going to ultimately get close to that. I don't think the Chiefs are going to pay him $30 million. But I also don't think that the Chiefs are going to be able to get away with paying him 22. So I think that there's going to be maneuvering on both sides. It might come down to the way it's structured. It might come down to what kind of cap space is freed up. It might come down to a number of years in the contract where both sides feel comfortable. There is absolutely a risk to sign Chris Jones to any contract in the same way that there is a risk to sign any player to any contract at any age. In a physical sport like football, there is that risk. And I understand your point in wanting to mitigate risk, but you also can't mitigate risk to a point to where it's a detriment to your organization. And we have seen the absolute impact that Chris Jones has brought to that defense. And we also know the way that defense and specifically that position would perform, we think, without him on the roster. Knowing all of that and taking all of that into consideration, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the very beginning of the show. I don't have a significant concern that this is not going to get done. I think it will. I think that both sides are going to continue to talk. It sounds like, according to Andy Reid, that talks were very positive up until just the other day. So I think that you can get away from that and you can steer the ship back on to the positive directions. And again, I'll reiterate what I said. I think he will ultimately report to training camp.
I do too, because I think they'll ultimately sign him. Tommy, did you know last year's first year in Chris Jones's career, he played every game?
Yeah, he was extremely durable last year. He played more, like I said, more snaps than any other player in the NFL.
That was the first time in his career that he played every game in a season. Before that, he'd missed 3, 4, 5, 9, and 5 games in those seasons. I want the Chiefs to sign Chris Jones. Don't misunderstand it. But it is not simple. Like, it's not an easy decision to make. Patrick Mahomes is an easy decision to make, right? Tyreek Hill was not an easy decision to make, although it was for the Chiefs. They said, see you later, pretty instantly. It's complicated. Chris Jones has not been a durable player. He was durable 1 year of his career last year. He's been hurt every other year of his career. And so, like, when you talk about a guy getting on the other side of 30, when you're going to pay him that kind of money, it is a concern. And if you have to do it, like if something really bad happens, then it's even more of a concern because it keeps you from signing other players on the roster. And we can say on July 24th of 2023 that it's an easy decision. They'll figure it out. But on July 24th of 2025, if Chris Jones gets hurt and then it's not an easy decision because it maybe cost you Willie Gay or Creed Humphrey or Trey Smith or somebody that you have to think about down the road. That's why these things get complicated. And that's why I think this thing may go a long time so that both sides can figure out a way. Here's what we want to do, Chris Jones. We want to get you the guaranteed money. We want to get you the total money. We got to figure out a way to get it to you that doesn't keep us from doing this other stuff. That's why this might take a while.
Make no mistake about it, though. The Kansas City Chiefs want to win the Super Bowl this season, right? They want to win it every year. They want to have a dynasty, but the most immediate goal is this year.
I don't believe that. They wouldn't have let Tyreek Hill go if they believed that. They wouldn't have let Tyreek Hill go if they believed that.
You don't think that they opened training camp with the most immediate goal to win a championship this year and to go back to back?
Did they not do that when they traded Tyreek Hill?
They absolutely did. But my point is that you don't plan. I don't think that you should plan for what's, basically cutting off your nose to spite your face and saying, all right, we're going to just not have Chris Jones because we're going to plan for 3 or 4 years down the line. Like the goal right now is to win another Super Bowl this season. So
it's
with whatever happens with Willie Gay and with Trip McDuffie and the offensive line, like those things will all play out. Those things, they'll cross that bridge when they get to them. Like that, I don't think that needs to be the primary concern right now. It's how do we keep our defense intact this season to go out and repeat as champions?
I don't know how you can say they think that way when they traded Tyreek Hill, who would have given them a better chance to win the Super Bowl last year. There's no question he would have. He was one of the best players in football last year.
But that doesn't mean their goal changes. That doesn't mean they trade away Tyreek Hill.
I know their goal
go,
doesn't change.
Hey,
if
we're
they
not,
don't,
we're not.
If
gonna,
they decide to not
compete.
to sign Chris Jones, that doesn't mean they don't want to win the Super Bowl this year. But
that gives you the best chance possible to do that. I think
Tyreek Hill gave him the best chance possible 2 years ago.
Those are two different situations, two different positions on different sides of the ball. I don't think you can equate Tyreek Hill to Chris Jones. I don't think that's fair to Chris Jones. Like they're two completely different players doing completely different things. You have a quarterback in Patrick Mahomes who throws the ball to Travis Kelce, number one, and then you've got other receivers that are able to step up. I'm not saying that Tyreek Hill wasn't great because he was, but Chris Jones is the quarterback of the defense. He is the anchor of the defense. He's the most important player on that side of the ball. You cannot equate him to Tyreek Hill and the way that situation played out.
I can because it was similar money. Patrick Mahomes was like Tom Brady in New England. There aren't very many teams in football that don't have to look at just this year, but the Chiefs are one of the teams that don't have to just look at this year. They are afforded through Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid the ability to look big picture. I mean, they're an organization that showed us that time and time and time again. If they were only worried about winning the Super Bowl that year, they wouldn't have drafted Patrick Mahomes when they had Alex Smith making Pro Bowls.
They're worried about winning the Super Bowl every year, but the most immediate concern is this one. It's not 3 or 4 years down the line when Willie Gay and Trip McDuffie's deals come up, or Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith's deals come up. It's right now. It's this season. It's repeating and going back to back. So they can want to plan for it every year, but the most immediate concern is putting the best roster on the field this season to repeat as champions.
But that exact same scenario existed last year. And with Tyrann Mathieu, with Tyreek Hill, with all
those players are not Chris Jones. Those players are not Chris Jones.
I think you're not giving the Chiefs credit enough for being as cutthroat as they have a history of being. It's not about being cutthroat.
It's not about being cutthroat. It's about making the best decision for your franchise. And the best decision is to sign Chris Jones to an extension. Bottom line.
There has to be a limit to what you're willing to do. There has to be. Why not just pay him more than Aaron Donald then?
But that's not what he's requesting. He's not asking to be the highest paid.
I mean, it's a $1 million difference.
NFL.
It's a $1 million difference. We don't know what he's requesting other than what's been reported, which is 30. But guess what was reported before right then in that report? That he wanted just a little more than Quinnen Williams. And that was wrong, clearly, according to now the new report.
This is going to get done. It's going to get done.
I think it will too. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I think it will get done too. But I've said forever, there's something else here that's making this take longer than we thought it would. And here it is. And it may take even longer because they have to reshuffle everything now if they're going to pay him that much. If they thought they were going to have to pay him, 24 or 25. 869-1240. We'll continue the conversation. You can chime in on the IHOP hotline. 869-1240 is that number to call. We'll come back. Some injuries at training camp today. Ugh, hate training camp. Every year this happens. We get to training camp, and I'm like, God, I hate training camp because guys get hurt. We'll talk about that more on Chris Jones as we return on Sports Daily.
I think I want to hear this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's give away some ticket vouchers for the Wichita Wind Surge here right off the top. We'll give you a 4-pack of those vouchers to see tickets that you can exchange for tickets to see a Wind Surge game of your choice, courtesy of Sports Daily and KFH. We'll give those to the first caller on the IHOP hotline. 869-1240 is that number to call. Welcome back into Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here with you. Jad will get us a winner there on those Wind Surge vouchers. We've been talking a lot about Chris Jones not reporting to training camp. There's a lot of players right now not reporting to training camp. Most of them happen to be at the running back position. Josh Jacobs spotted on a flight out of Vegas. Saquon Barkley not reporting and had some choice words for his options that are on the table. We know the running backs met over the weekend to talk about or probably just vent about the situation. Some injuries already today. We saw Nyheim Hines for the Bills go down what looks like for the season. That is a big blow to the Bills.
Did you hear about what happened to him? Did you read what the
No,
situation
I just saw
with him?
the injury was season ending.
So he was apparently sitting stationary on a jet ski, I think on a lake, and another jet ski rammed into him. And they said that he had serious but non-life-threatening injuries that would require surgery, and he'll miss the entire year. Just kind of a freak thing for Nyheim Hines.
And he was a big part of what they were trying to do there this year too. That was a big weapon for them. So that sucks. That sucks. That's not even a training camp injury. No. Then there's a training camp injury today. CJ Gardner-Johnson for the Lions, right leg injury. By all accounts, it looked really bad. His teammates were consoling him. So look, it's just that time of year where you just sort of hold your breath, and then we get into training camp and you hold your breath and wonder and hope that you don't have something crazy happen, as it always does. So we enter that portion of the football season. Like, it's one thing during the season when guys miss, because they do all the time, right? But when it's now, I feel like it stings more when it comes before the season ever gets started, because you have all this buzz. We're like, all right, we're so excited about this guy, and oh, good, we never got to see him play at all. We're great. There goes the season, right? Like, I don't know that Nyheim Hines is a there goes the season moment for the Bills, but that's tough,
right? You as we're talking about injuries, I think it is notable. Kadarius Toney went down with an injury over the weekend. The reports were that he tweaked his knee. And so it sounds like it's not serious, but
he was
that always gives you a little, it gives you a little bit of pause knowing his injury history, that he wasn't able to complete a practice this weekend.
I mean, I feel like there's like a 0% chance that Kadarius Toney makes it through a full season. Like, not even a slight possibility that he makes it through a full season. It's what can you get out of Kadarius Toney that allows you to be the best version of yourself. Sky Moore feels so critical to me this year, because Kadarius Toney's I love Kadarius Toney as a player, but guy can't stay on the field for whatever reason. So these other guys around him are going to have to step up pretty quickly. And I think Toney just becomes maybe what do you pencil him in for? I mean, what's reasonable? 12 games, 13 games?
Yeah, I was going to say 10. If you can get a minimum of 10 games out of him, playing a little bit more than half the games this year, I mean, I guess that's good. Not ideal, but I guess that's good. I really hope that we see Sky Moore take a significant step forward this year. I think he will, but I really want to see that, because, man, the Chiefs have placed their hopes and dreams in that wide receiver room basically on his shoulders, because I think they know that you're not probably going to get an entire year out of Kadarius Toney. And the free agent signees and the draft picks are good, but they're not wide receiver one type material. They didn't get DeAndre Hopkins. They're really, I think, banking on Sky Moore being the guy. And we saw flashes of it towards the end of last year, but I really hope that he's able to take that step forward.
He was not at practice today, Kadarius Toney. Sky Moore, yeah, he's the guy. He's the guy. There's video out from the first day of camp of Mahomes hitting Rashee Rice on a little touchdown. He could be. That's the thing about rookie receivers now. We used to have to wait 2 or 3 years before receivers really like blew up. Receivers can be great in year one anymore, the way the game's played. So maybe Rashee Rice is an impact guy too. I do think the Chiefs are baking in Tony missing games. I do. I think that they've clearly been planning for that in the way that they've constructed things. It's actually one of the places you feel pretty good about depth. And it might be the only place you feel good about the depth on the offense is wide receiver. And Kadarius Toney, just like he did last year, just sort of feels like this icing on the cake, right? Like it's going to be great if we have him. Man, he's going to be a weapon, but we probably aren't going to have him all the time. So we better have, we better be ready for that reality too. It is, it's salivating what he could do if he played every game in a season in this offense based on what we've seen out of him when he is on the field in his NFL career. It just almost seems impossible, though, that that's going to happen. And they really do. I agree with Sky Moore. I loved him last year. I think that, the returning punts got in his head a little bit. I do also think, though, Patrick Mahomes seems like he trusted him a little bit. He did keep going to, and Patrick Mahomes is good at doing that with anybody. Like he can come right back at you. We'll see.
I don't know if you saw this. I saw a report from training camp over the weekend of the list of players that were like practicing receiving punts, and Sky Moore was one of them. And I'm like, no, like, why are we doing this? And I know that like they've got a couple of other players that they want to work in to be the primary punt returner. I think Kadarius Toney, obviously, we saw him in the Super Bowl. If he's healthy, he's got to be the guy. And I know that they're trying to give Sky Moore extra reps. I just want that experiment to be done. I let him focus on being the best wide receiver possible. I do not need to see him back there muffing punts, messing with his confidence. Like that is not something that I'm interested in watching this season.
So Jesse Newell on yesterday was just sort of charting the first team wide receivers, and you don't get to stay for the whole time. But Sky Moore, plenty of opportunities, said to be the top guy. Richie James had a great practice.
Yeah.
And that Justin Ross was very involved. Kadarius Toney, they didn't see much of. I do think I think they're deep there, right? Like I think that of all the positions on the field for this team, that is one of the spots where they feel kind of deep, right?
Yeah, they're deep. I don't disagree with you. They're deep, but I think they're unproven for the most part.
Oh,
and
sure.
So that's going to be the major question. Like not about the amount of depth, but just about what kind of production can we get from them.
Well, I listen. I applaud Juju Smith-Schuster for what he did for the team last year. Very replaceable, right? He was consistent. He was on there. He was out there for them. Marquez Valdes-Scantley's still on the team. It didn't change really that much. The room didn't, outside of Juju being gone. And I just think
Mecole Hardman's gone.
A real high okay. There's two.
I mean, I'm just saying.
I know you're right. You're right. Yep. I think there's a very high probability that even these unproven guys can have replacement value over those two guys. I do. That's not a knock on either one of those guys. They were very critical to the Chiefs winning a Super Bowl. I just think they've done a good job with enough people there that it's like, okay, we can replace that production. As long as Travis Kelce's there, they'll be okay. And Kadarius Toney, again, icing on the cake. Like, I don't know what to expect out of him other than he's as dynamic a player at the position as there is, but he's never out there. And that's half the battle in the NFL. We're all watching the quarterback series. Once you start the season, like half the battle of the NFL season is staying on the field.
Yeah. They don't win the Super Bowl against the Eagles without Kadarius Toney on the field. That touchdown catch and the punt return to seal the deal. They don't win a championship without him. And we, like I said, we saw flashes of the brilliance and the player that he could be. The reason why he was such a high draft pick for the Giants when he came out of college, there's a reason for all of that. We've seen flashes of it, but again, the knock has always been he's injury prone. Can he stay on the field? And it wasn't encouraging, I guess would be the word, to know that he already has an injury in training camp. Hopefully it's not severe. Hopefully we're able to see him back out there, but he's kind of like, in my opinion, sort of like Isaiah Pacheco, where it's like, shut him down. We know the kind of guy he can be. We don't need to see him do a whole lot more in training camp or preseason to know the kind of receiver that he is. Keep him healthy, get him ready so they can use him for as many regular season games as possible.
I wouldn't play Isaiah Pacheco one snap in the
No,
preseason.
I wouldn't play
really
Kadarius
wouldn't.
Toney one snap in the preseason either.
Well, I kind of need
Why?
to see Tony.
Like, what's the benefit?
Because
you already know
I
what
think,
he can do.
Well, we know what he can do, but we have to know what I think you sort of have to know what the offense is with him and without him, right? Like, because you have to plan for both, right? Like, where formationally, structurally, like, how does it look with him and without him? Here's honestly, I would have him returning punts in the season because I think he's an impact player there, and I think his injury risk is so high anyway. I think that's what I think. I reserve the right to change my mind on that, but I think that's a decent spot for him. But if he doesn't play because they're careful with him, I'm okay with it. But I don't know that I feel the same way I do about Pacheco, where it's like, do not play him. There's no value in playing him. I do think there's some value into mixing Tony in because I think you've got 3 or 4 guys that are going to move around to 3 or 4 different spots and really mix it up there. And I guess you could just put somebody in his place and still do that. Maybe. I don't know. But we just need to see him on the field. He's been off the field for more than injuries too, right? Like he has some other things that have creeped up off the field that, according to some reporting, was a problem with the Giants. He's a weird dude. You gotta keep him happy. You gotta keep him on the field. However you do it, I agree with you. Whatever it takes. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll come back. Sports Daily continuing on here on this Monday edition. Got the Aftershocks coming up tomorrow night. Man, I just this dadgum Naheem Hines thing. That sucks.
Pretty bad.
Amari Cooper left practice today too, by the way.
Hey, by the way, big anniversary today. I know
right.
I texted you about it. I'm sure we can talk about it after the break because it's one of the most iconic moments in baseball history.
Yeah, that's a good tease. We'll hit that next. It is maybe the most iconic moment in the history of the Kansas City Royals. That's next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back into Sports Daily, everybody. It's Albracht and Castor. All right, Tommy. Most iconic moment in Royals franchise history, the Pine Tar incident?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's number one. I was thinking about it during the break, like other iconic moments. I mean, the World Series wins are
I think you
up
have
there
to put
for
those
sure.
up there now.
Yeah. Both 85 and 2015. The throw from Bo Jackson, that one play where, and maybe when he ran up the wall, basically anything with Bo Jackson, breaking the bat over his leg, throwing the guy out at, I think it was third base. Like those are all up there. That wild card game against Oakland in 2014, that's got to be up there. But the Pine Tar incident with George Brett, that it's got to be number one.
It's strange that I do think you can have a discussion on what's more iconic, winning the World Series there in 2015 or that. But it's not just for the Royals. It's across baseball, right? The Pine Tar thing is like an iconic moment. If you took like a top moments in the history of baseball of like interesting thing that's happened, that's one of them. And George Brett is, he is Mr. Royal, right? And that's when I think about that moment in George Brett, that's why I always am like, I will be just fine if the Royals never trade Salvador Perez, because I think he can join George Brett as the most iconic players in franchise history. Because I think George Brett still is that, even now after that last generation in the back-to-back World Series and everything else. I think George Brett's still the most iconic Royal of all time. And I don't think even Salvador Perez or Zach Greinke or anybody else that might go into the Hall of Fame, like those guys aren't going to take that title from him. And for him, that's the most iconic moment of his career. Love it or hate it, it just is.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations too that the entire thing, just the drama around it. You've got Billy Martin making a scene. He's handing the bat to the umpires. The umpires are examining it like they're scientists in a laboratory. And then just the emphatic out call. And here comes Brett. And what I love about it is that, that's back in the day where it's not like there was railing on the dugout. So he was just out of his seat up the stairs and there in seconds before anybody could grab him. Incredible. If you follow the Royals on Twitter, I guess, it's still called Twitter for now. If you follow them on Twitter, they released like a remastered audio version of that this morning. You can go watch it for the 40th anniversary where, some of those words are, obviously they're choice words and it's pretty crystal clear audio. It's pretty good quality for 40 years ago.
It's awesome. It is a fun moment. And, it's one like from an outsider's perspective growing up, like I didn't know a lot about the Royals. They weren't ever very good, but yeah, the display of athleticism for him to get up and in there that fast is good. That's good stuff. And it will always be celebrated. The Pine Tar game, like everybody if you said the Pine Tar game, everybody that's the baseball fan will tell you what it is.
So I watched I think it was a pregame interview over the weekend. Of course, the Royals are in New York to play the Yankees. We're in New York this weekend. And so it was real fitting with the anniversary and all of that. And the broadcasters for the Royals did an interview with Dan Hurley, of all people, the head coach of UConn basketball, who grew up in the New York, New Jersey area and was a kid when the Pine Tar incident happened. And he said on the broadcast that he became a Royals fan and George Brett was his favorite player because of the Pine Tar incident. It wasn't a Yankees player. He wasn't a fan of the Yankees, but because of the Pine Tar incident, he became a Royals fan. And I thought that was pretty cool.
It is cool. It is cool. And, when you're a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest players that ever played, but people know who you are because of that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm sure George Brett's answered that question. But it's interesting. It is very, very interesting. But that is 40 years ago today, the Pine Tar incident. So historians out there, enjoy that. Enjoy that. I'm going to have to go look up that remastered audio version. I haven't seen that yet. So we'll do that. All right. 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. We're going to come back. We're going to tell you what's on tap today. Next on Sports Daily.
Visit Maximum.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining in here on The Fun on a Monday. We'll have much more with training camp. We'll get you ready for the Aftershocks game tomorrow as well. Congratulations to our winners of our HTO Iced Tea, of our Wichita Wind Surge ticket vouchers. And we'll give away some more tomorrow as well. Coming up on the network today, regular programming, including Bob and Jeff here locally from 2 to 4. You've got the Royals at at Guardians, my apologies. Royals Guardians, 6 o'clock. Coming up later today, you'll hear that here on KFH. We continue to watch the trade deadline. It's been a quiet deadline with just about a week to go. So lots of news there. Tommy, enjoy the day.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow.
For Tommy and Jad, I'm Jacob. Tuesday edition. We'll see you then.